Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump says he will try to reclaim some territory for Ukraine during his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Trump does claim that they will need to cede land, while he says he will know within minutes if Putin wants to end the war. European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky plan to speak with President Trump ahead of the summit, amid fears Washington may impose unfavorable peace terms on Ukraine. Zelensky says there is no sign Russia is preparing for peace. The United Nations has condemned Israel's killing of Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza. This comes as the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in denial about Gaza's humanitarian crisis. Pakistan have welcomed a move by the United States that designates the Pakistani separatist Baloch Liberation Army as a foreign terrorist organization. The BLA is the strongest of several insurgent groups operating near the Afghan-Iran border. US President Donald Trump says he is sending 800 National Guard troops to Washington and temporarily taking control of the city's police department. The move bypasses the city's elected leaders and reflects his second-term approach of wielding executive power. The United States and China extend a tariff truce for 90 days, avoiding triple-digit duties as US retailers prepare for the holiday season. Trump signs an executive order suspending higher tariffs until November the 10th, with all other terms remaining in place. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung will visit the United States this month for his first meeting with President Donald Trump since taking office. The summit on August the 25th will highlight a new trade deal and shared security issues. Brazil's President Lula and China's President Xi Jinping held a one-hour phone call on Monday discussing BRICS, bilateral business, and the G20's role in defending multilateralism. Both leaders agreed on strengthening the bloc's influence. We start this hour in Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that Russia is preparing a new offensive operation just days before US President Donald Trump meets Russian President Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, for high-stakes peace talks. Local residents in Alaska are calling the summit historic, but opinions are split. Some hope it will boost the state's profile, while others express skepticism about Trump's approach, especially after he suggested both Kiev and Moscow may have to cede land to end the war. European leaders are also concerned, with EU foreign ministers holding an emergency meeting, stressing that no concessions should be made without a comprehensive ceasefire. They are pushing ahead with a 19th round of sanctions against Moscow and seeking to ensure European security concerns are part of the talks. In Ukraine, soldiers on the front line reject any land for peace deal. Fighters from the 58th Brigade told Reuters that all occupied territories must be reclaimed, with one soldier declaring, quote, "We must return the entire territory of Ukraine." Let's take a listen in.
Війна продовжиться. Я не згоден з таким же. Моє мнення, я не згоден. Просто віддати стільки людей, загинуло, ви ж самі розумієте, скільки загинуло людей, щоб просто віддати. Кому віддати? За що віддати?
The Trump-Putin meeting, the first face-to-face since 2021, takes place on Friday, with both sides under pressure to deliver progress, but deep divisions remain over what peace should look like. We're now joined by Keith Vaz, who's a former UK minister. He joins us live from London. Keith, thank you very much for joining us. What are your worries about these approaching talks coming up in Alaska? And are the European leaders' concerns correct in in pushing for Ukraine's sovereignty in these talks?
Good morning from London, Thomas. Look, the situation is this. This is a very, very important meeting. We cannot underestimate how important this meeting is. The first meeting of a US president and a Russian president in over 5 years, as you said. It is essential that the meeting is successful. However, the Ukrainians and President Zelensky will be the first to say that he should be at that meeting. We don't know as yet whether he is invited. It seems from comments made by President Trump that he might be invited, but the first meeting will clearly be between President Putin and Donald Trump. Now, the European leaders are concerned because they are very fearful, knowing the way in which Donald Trump conducts his democracy, his diplomacy, and knowing the fact that the Ukrainians will be very keen to make sure that they don't concede anything. The concern is that something will be said at this meeting which will concede territory belonging to Ukraine. That's why European leaders have met to make it very clear that there should be no agreement made without Ukraine being present. That must be right. You cannot have two countries meeting together to decide on the sovereignty of a third country. This is not Yalta. This is modern day diplomacy, modern day politics. So many people have died. They haven't died in vain. And that is why it's important to make sure that there is agreement right at the start. That is the concern of Europe. Once you concede at a meeting of this kind, it is very, very difficult to row back. And that is why President Trump must have the authority, of the Ukrainian leader before he makes any decision and yields any land belonging to Ukraine.
Keith, Zelensky has issued a warning saying that Russia is preparing a new offensive. Obviously, these talks coming up on Friday. How do you think this will be perceived by the US president if that turns out to be true?
Well, it's a very dangerous game of chess. Of course, what Russia wants to say to President Trump is that this is not the end. This is an interlude in the middle of a war. And that is why it is essential that this kind of information is brought to the attention of President Trump. Of course, the Russians will be preparing for the next step because they obviously don't believe that there's going to be a solution on Friday of this week. They believe these are going to be talks, these are preliminary talks, nothing final is going to be decided. So they're keeping their military options open. No one who negotiates with another foreign power will want to assume that everything's going to stop. This is not a ceasefire. That's not been agreed. This is preparing for what's going to happen on Saturday. So Friday you have the meeting. It's going to be inconclusive if Ukraine is not part of it. Saturday, you're probably going to have a new offensive. I would doubt that the offensive would start before the talks on Friday. I doubt it. I think President Zelensky is right. They're preparing. I'm sure he's preparing as well. Let's be very clear. It hasn't all stopped. Everyone is preparing for the next stage, and the next stage will start on Saturday.
Keith, the two men at the center of this meeting in Alaska, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, critics have said that this is possibly more symbolic rather than actually moving towards peace. How do you expect the two men to act? What do we expect out of the occasion?
Well, I'm a veteran of many summit meetings, not at this kind of level, I have to tell you. I've never been the president or prime minister of a country. But those who are below the surface, who are not heads of state, will have already decided. You don't go to a summit unless you know what the outcome is. You don't go to a meeting between Trump and Putin and not know what's already been decided, because there's no point in Trump coming. This is not about them having a friendly chinwag. They already know the outcome. The two of them know the outcome of this, and so do all the other officials preparing. So it will not come as a surprise to either of them as to what's going on. I don't know, is the answer, what they've agreed. I would imagine just the fact of holding this meeting is itself a world-shattering event. It is massive. And it'll become even more massive if they have a meeting on their own and sitting in the next room is President Zelensky, and President Zelensky then comes in and has a discussion. So from that point of view, it is going to be big. It's big. Thomas, I'm sure you would love to be there as one of the journalists. I certainly would love to be in Alaska on Friday. It's the only place in the world that one should be. But whether or not there's going to be a decisive series of agreements, probably not. They would have leaked out by now. You can't decide anyway without President Zelensky. And now all the European leaders all want to have their say. So everyone wants to have their stake in this great meeting.
Keith Vaz, pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. We now move over to the Middle East for our next story, where Palestinians at Gaza's al-ahli Arab hospital bid farewell on Tuesday to their loved ones killed in Israeli strikes on Gaza City. Witnesses and medics say Israeli planes and tanks pounded eastern districts of Gaza City overnight, killing 7 people in 2 houses in the Zeitoun suburb and 4 in an apartment building in the city centre. The Israeli military says it is looking into the reports and that its forces take precautions to mitigate civilian harm. The war in Gaza began on October the 7th of 2023 when Hamas terrorists stormed into southern Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking 251 hostages. Israel's ground and war offensive has since then killed more than 61,000 Palestinians and left much of the enclave in ruins. We're now joined by Ali M. Abushbak. He's a Middle East researcher. He joins us live from Cairo. Ali, thank you very much for joining us on the program. The humanitarian situation continues to escalate in the enclave. Ali, what more can you tell us about the current rate that how things are moving on the ground when it comes to aid? Obviously, we've seen a lot of international pressure on the Israeli government to let humanitarian aid into the enclave. However, that has not stopped hostilities, it's not stopped strikes. What more can you tell us about the ongoing situation?
Thank you, Thomas. Accompanied this malnutrition in Gaza and the starvation in Gaza yesterday. It was a heavy night for the Palestinians since Israel intensively bombarded Gaza, and that's most of the airstrike. It focused on southwestern Gaza and northern western Gaza in al-Zeitoun neighborhood and Hayy al-Daraj neighborhood also. This is in Gaza City. In south part of Gaza, Israel's airstrike focused on Khan Yunis, the south part of Gaza, and Israel seized more than 90% of this city, Khan Yunis city, and just what is remained, Mawasi Khan Yunis, which Israel continuously bombarded this area. Today also, Thomas, more than 100 civilians have been killed during this night, the heavy night, and randomly bombardment in the Palestinians citizens. Among of them, 11 Palestinians, they have been killed, who's pursuing for the humanitarian aid and those waiting for the humanitarian aid and collecting the humanitarian aid. Among of them, one child, he has been confirmed die because of malnourished. Situation on the ground, it's completely difficult. Thomas, the Palestinians, they are concerned about if Israel going to invade Gaza City, where they are going to displace. Yesterday, it was the mural for Anas Sharif, the journalist, and it was a mourning day for the Palestinians in Gaza City, and it was the funeral. It was a massive. People have been participated in this funeral. In every day, Palestinians, they are losing their loved one, and every day they are losing their home. making the situation more difficult and making the situation more complex to solve. Also, yesterday, Israelis captive family, they are asking for general strike in Israel in Tel Aviv. The situation, it seems that it's going for worse more than what we are watching and what we are observing nowadays. Also about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, despite there is a sum of stuff and glossaries on the market, but still there is a crisis. Civilians can't purchase this due to the high price of these items on the market. As you know that, Thomas, most of the humanitarian aid that into Gaza, it's looted by the civilians and looted by the military peoples, and it's unknowing military people. Some of the observers, they consider this militant. It's related to a Palestinian family who has several of civilians. They looted the humanitarian aid and they are using for their benefits, and sometimes they put it in the market to sell it in high price.
Yes.
So it's a situation. It's completely difficult. The humanitarian situation is completely difficult, and the people, as I mentioned, they are waiting and also monitoring what will happen with them if the Israelis IDF demand and call them for displaced from Gaza City
Yes.
to south part of Gaza.
Ali, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss related developments. We now move on. New Zealand parliamentarian Chloe Swarbrick was ordered to leave Parliament today during a heated debate over the government's response to Palestine. An urgent debate was called after the centre-right government said on Monday that it was weighing in on its position on whether to recognise a Palestinian state. Swarbrick, co-leader of the Green Party, called New Zealand a laggard and an outlier and urged government members to support a bill to sanction Israel for its war crimes. Speaker Jerry Brownlee said the remark was completely unacceptable and ordered her to withdraw it and apologise. When she refused, she was ordered to leave. We're now joined once again by Ali Emma Bushback. We've seen more calls to recognise a Palestinian state, pushing governments. Certain governments say they are now going to, G7, 3 G7 members even have said that they are going to recognise the state of Palestine. New Zealand possibly soon to do the same. What is the importance behind this, or is this just largely symbolic, Ali?
Thomas, as I mentioned before, it will not change it will not change the things on the ground, and it will not prohibit Israel to invade Gaza and to control Gaza City and occupy it. It just has a symbolic that Palestinian is a state, and it's a one step for the two-state solution that international community demand and call Israel to commit to this notion to accept the Palestinian as a neighbor state for them and and enhance the Palestinian Authority to establish their statehood. The symbolic also of this, it may, after the pressure of the civilians and the activists who talk the street and lambasting the silence of their government and criticizing this silence. Despite that, it has no meaning, it has no action, since they are not imposed a sanction on Israel and stop Israel by action, but just they are trying to be a mutual in this conflict. And we have seen that a strong allies for Israel, Germany, they are going to recognize the Palestinian statehood.
Yes,
This
Ali.
is in diplomacy, it's giving the Palestinian power, and it's giving that Palestinian narrative, it's reached to the government and the diplomatic people, and it's reached from the grassroots to the international community, and it has a moral things for the Palestinian that there is a glamour of who may the international community will take an action and stop the Israelis from controlling Gaza and occupied Gaza, and stop the Israeli settlement in West Bank and the notion to establish a settlement in Gaza, as Smotrich, and now Smotrich is there is a tension between between Smotrich and Benjamin Netanyahu with regard occupying Gaza and the
Yes,
recent plan
Ali.
to.
We are moving on to a related development, which you are staying with us for. Israeli opposition chief Yair Lapid on Tuesday backed calls for a general strike in solidarity with hostages still held in Gaza. In a statement on X, Lapid urged supporters of the current government to take part. Lapid's post followed a call on Sunday by around 20 parents of hostages for a strike. On Monday, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum backed the idea, urging citizens to take a day off to follow their conscience. The group again accused the government of sacrificing the remaining hostages on the altar of an endless aiming war. We are once again joined by Ali M. Bushback. Ali, what's been your analysis on how Benjamin Netanyahu has treated the priority of the Israeli hostages who are still held in Gaza? There's still currently 20 hostages that are believed to be alive in the enclave. What are your thoughts about Netanyahu's government when it comes to their safety?
Thomas, it's clear for the Israeli community, Benjamin Netanyahu, especially for left wing in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, this war is not for releasing the captive and the hostages in Gaza, and Benjamin Netanyahu is using this war for his benefit and for extend his time in the government and maintaining his government coalition. So there is no doubt about this notion in Israeli community, as well as this notion. It's clear for the Palestinian civilians that Benjamin Netanyahu used this war for his benefit. Also, worth mentioning that, Thomas, since the 2023, when Israel waged the war in Gaza after Hamas led the attack on Israel, Israel has never released hostages by the military pressure. It's just only by negotiation faith. So the thing is very clear that pressure and sizing Gaza, it's not only putting the Israelis captive under the risk. And this is a very clear for the Israeli community that when Benjamin Netanyahu is going to conduct his plan to occupy Gaza, they will put them under the risk, and Hamas it's going to kill them because
Yes.
They will be in the risk. Today we have seen several of claims to a general strike in Tel Aviv, and this is one of the good steps to pressurize Benjamin Netanyahu, despite I don't consider that he was going to go back of his plan. By the way, it's worth mentioning that, Thomas, there is a Palestinian Hamas delegation leading by Khalil al-Hayya on he's going to reach Cairo to meet several of Egyptian mediator. That will push the negotiation and push the talk between Hamas and Israel, because you know that Egypt is one of a significant mediator between Hamas and Israel in negotiation that have been located in.
Ali, thank you so much, and thank you so much for bringing that information to us. We now move over to Europe, where a severe heat wave continues to grip the continent, bringing tragic consequences and fueling dangerous wildfires. In Italy, a 4-year-old Romanian boy died of heat stroke days after being found unconscious in his family's car in Sardinia. In Spain, wildfires are threatening a UNESCO World Heritage Site, while French cities record scorching temperatures in the high 30s and low 40s. In southwestern France, a wildfire that swept through 230 hectares of woodland in the Charente department is now under control. After hundreds of firefighters were deployed, no casualties were reported. It comes just days after France's biggest wildfire in 8 decades ravaged the Aude department, burning 16,000 hectares since August the 5th. That blaze has left 1 person dead, 19 firefighters injured and 6 civilians, and destroyed dozens of homes. Let's listen in to what the residents said.
Sí, al cabo de una hora, hora y media, más o menos, ya la Guardia Civil había mandado que salieran del pueblo todos los vecinos.
No hemos tenido luz en toda la tarde. Marchamos ahí al pueblo de al lado a ayudar a los vecinos, sin luz y sin teléfono, que no sabíamos si estaban vivos o estaban muertos, que eso no podía ser. Venía la gente desalojada, que venían de Carocedo de por ahí, vinieron a la gasolinera al puente, sin luz y sin nada, no se le podía tirar gasoil.
Authorities warn that hot, dry conditions could ignite more fires. Officials blame the scale of the destruction on climate change and the loss of vineyards, which once acted as national fire breaks but have been removed amid falling wine demand and cuts to subsidies. We're now joined by Joshua Barnes. He's an anchor and correspondent. Joshua, what further context can you give us about what's going on in Europe right now?
Well, yes, absolutely, Thomas. The situation for so many living in these Mediterranean areas, south of France, in areas of Spain, also in Greece and Turkey, in recent weeks have seen a huge amount of destruction caused by these wildfires. As you said, environmental issues surrounding global warming leading to further blazes. Now, it's not just the fires themselves which are causing devastation. The actual level of heat itself is also having deadly consequences. Around the start of July, there was a huge spike in temperatures across so many European countries, with red alerts being placed. And that saw a study very quickly put together in just under a fortnight, which said that from those extreme heats in Europe, around 2,300 deaths had been recorded. Now, that's over a short period of time at the end of June and beginning of July. So that provides context on quite how deadly this heat can be. Of course, red alerts are now in place for France, Spain and other regions as well. So it's difficult, and there are inevitably going to be further deaths that are caused as a result of this extreme heat. The question now turns towards what is going to be done about it. So much is spoken in the geopolitical space about global warming. It's an issue that we know is continuing. We know it is happening. There are summits which are ongoing, yet many climate activists, like those that we speak to on this programme, say that not enough is being done, not enough importance is being placed on the planet that is having deadly consequences and devastating impacts to people's livelihoods. Of course, with a shift from the US, they're looking now at rolling back against so many climate pledges that were there, more drilling, more fossil fuel being produced. It has a huge financial impact for the countries which produce it, but of course the devastating impact on communities is felt in this way, one of many ways in which climate change is having a negative impact on civilians' day-to-day life. We will continue to monitor the situations as these fires across Europe continue to spread, but overall the question remains on not how you put them out now, but how do you stop fanning the flames for future generations.
Joshua, thank you very much for providing that context. We now move on once again. The United States and China have agreed to extend their tariff truce for another 90 days, avoiding a sharp rise in duties that could have reached 145% on US imports and a 125% on Chinese goods. This extension, announced on Monday, keeps tariffs at current levels, 30% on Chinese imports and 10% on US goods, giving retailers crucial time to prepare for the holiday season. Analysts say this truce eases tensions and buys time for further talks, possibly ahead of a planned meeting between President Trump and Xi later this year. Let's listen in.
My guess is we'll continue to have an extension going forward, at least until Xi and Trump have a way to meet each other one-on-one. But even after that, after they've set the tone that negotiation is still in the cards, we'll probably continue to see different levels of extension, maybe by sector, maybe by tariff categories and so forth. But the negotiation will continue extensively because the issues are so complex.
Meanwhile, residents in China expressed cautious optimism, hoping for less confrontation and more cooperation between the two superpowers. Let's listen in to what they said.
我觉得影响不大吧，因为特朗普的话最近有点反复无常嘛，这样的话，我觉得对我们影响到，我们不需要太在意这个事情，因为
我感觉谈判肯定是两国之间往更好的方向发展，就是达成目标一致性嘛。这关税可能说未来谈判可能是那25%可能就如果没有取得阶级性进展的话，可能会继续延迟下去。
We're now joined by Andrew K.P. Liang. He's a China strategist and he joins us live from London. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Is this a welcomed move, another 90-day pause to make room for further negotiations between the world's two largest economies? What are your thoughts on this pause?
Well, it comes as no surprise, really, to people who are in the know in China, because it only shows that President Trump is very eager to do a deal. He doesn't want to break off. What he wants is what he can parade as another win in this trade talks with China, and particularly ending up with a meeting with President Xi. So he's extending the deadline again and again and again. And that shows his eagerness. And particularly, there's only also a reflection of China's managing to find a stranglehold over the United States in terms of the rare earths, because they are totally irreplaceable, China's dominance there. So China's in a very, very strong negotiating position. And I think that Trump knows that, and he wants to have a deal eventually. And then as detailed negotiations are going on, he wants to continue to push the envelope as far as possible, hence his extension. But at the end of the day, he doesn't want a deal badly so that he can parade it as a win, as in the case of his negotiations with Putin over Ukraine. And so that's part of the dynamics in the White House. And I think that Beijing knows that these dynamics truly well.
Yes, Andrew K.P. Liang, thank you for joining us on the programme. We now move on and over to South America, where relatives and friends of the deceased Colombian senator and presidential hopeful figure, Miguel Uribe, gathered at the Congress building in Bogotá on Monday for a farewell ceremony. Uribe had been vying for his party's candidacy in the upcoming presidential elections, but died 2 months after being shot in the head at a campaign rally. The attack was the worst outbreak of political violence in 2 decades. 6 people have been arrested over the shooting, including 2 men who, according to the Attorney General's office, met in Medellin to plan the assassination. Speaking at the ceremony, Uribe's wife, Claudia Tarazona, urged Colombians to reject violence and revenge. Let's take a listen in to what Uribe's wife had to say.
Que ojalá se haga justicia, porque la justicia fortalece la democracia. Que los seres humanos respondan por sus actos hace un país justo. Y debe haber justicia, no solo por Miguel, sino por una Colombia entera que merece vivir en paz.
Colombians also gathered at the site where Uribe was shot and mourned his death. Let's take a listen in to what some Colombians had to say on.
Hoy los colombianos sentimos tristeza porque nuestra vida es menospreciada por las estructuras criminales que nos gobiernan. No han apreciado lo que significa la vida de cada uno de nosotros.
Lo siento yo como lo sentimos la mayoría de colombianos, la gran mayoría de colombianos, un dolor de patria. Un dolor de patria por esto lo que acabó de ocurrir. Teníamos una esperanza de que, que reviviera.
We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute, and he joins us live from Tokyo, Japan, to discuss this further. Dr. Nagao, thank you, as always, for joining us. What can you tell us a bit more about the man that died at age 39, Miguel Uribe, and also the state of Colombia's politics right now?
This is a very important incident to prove the law and order situation in Colombia is deteriorated. So that's why this is a big problem for the current federal government. Because Uribe could be the, will be the candidate from the opposition party. But if he was killed, of course, this is an incident to prove Pedro's policy is wrong. Because under the federal government, he tried to negotiate with the other armed group in Colombia for peace. But this negotiation was failed in many cases in case of Colombia last some years. Because of course, negotiation between government and the group is has a problem. But at the same time, there are many groups in the Colombia, and between the group and group, there are many conflicts too. So that's why the current government failed to control the law and order situation, and deteriorating law and order situation is a matter again in Colombia. So that's why this incident has happened, because current government policy was wrong. The people see that could happen. So next year, the president election will happen. And the last president election, that was a very close race, tight race. This means that there is a possibility opposition will get more power to persuade the people. So that is a political part of this incident, I believe. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us here on the programme and for your insight on that matter. Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.